Thank you, everybody, for coming in. It's really crowded, so well, I'm flattered. So my name is Jack. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a tech company called Cury Innovations. And basically, we develop 3D scanner apps that you can download on your phone, like you just saw the video. You can turn photos around an object, and then we use our magic power to turn that photos into a 3D model that's ready for Unreal Engine, Blender, like you said, like you've seen, stuff like that. Yeah. But today it's not really about my product. It's about 3D Gaussian Splatting. But we have a really packed agenda for 30 minutes, so I'll try to make it in time. But I was informed before I got it started because this session is actually being recorded. So if you guys please, can you turn off? Well, not turn off, but silent your phone. So your sexy tone won't be appear on the video on YouTube. All right. Yeah, so we have a really packed agenda, but I'm sure we can make it. So basically, we're going to go from a little introduction about what we do. I'll go through really fast because it's really not about Cury Engine this time. But basically, Cury Engine, it's a 3D scanner app you can download on your phone, both Android and iOS, and you can just take videos or photos around an object, and you get a 3D model. But what's really cool about Cury Engine is if you look at how the actual game developers develop 3D models, we actually need professionally prepared 3D models with a lot of things, right? Imagine you want a 3D model yourself, you have to go through all these complicated and tedious steps. But normally, 3D scanner software, doesn't matter how expensive it is. It sometimes always give you 3D model, but it's not perfectly UV unwrapped. It's not perfectly a PBR baked stuff like that. So what we are trying to do is at Cury, we really wanted to help game developers like you guys to solve the 3D model problems, to give you a really professionally prepared 3D model. And how do we do that? Basically, we can turn triangular mesh to quad mesh, so you can work on your product 3D models better. And also, we have a magic power to turn an unwrapped UV to a wrapped UV with PBR materials, which is pretty cool. So basically, this is just a showcase from one of our users on Instagram, and look at how he turned that model toy car into a quad mesh, fully unwrapped. With PBR materials that's actually ready for Unreal Engine. It's really cool. So but another really cool thing I personally really like, what's really set Cury Engine apart from other software is we can first time 3D scan transparent and shiny objects, which is unbelievable before for photogrammetry. Thanks to a new technology called neural surface reconstruction, or NSR for short. In Cury Engine, it's featureless object scanning. And but basically, until now, everything I presented is pretty cool, right? But the problem is sometimes people have really bad experience with Cury Engine. Like this guy. So basically, the reason why people are divided into a group of users who has really good experience with Cury Engine versus another group of people who don't really have good experience with Cury Engine is because it doesn't matter if we use photogrammetry before or the new NSR you saw just now. They do require fairly steep learning curve to learn how to properly photo scan an object. Right? It doesn't matter if Cury Engine has been around for 2 years, but we've been around for 2 years. But sometimes we do see bad reviews about people trying to photo scan something but it didn't work. Because to get a successful 3D scan, sometimes you have to know what photogrammetry is, right? You have to know what photo scanning is because not everything can be scanned. You know that, right? Basically, you have to pick the right objects that has featureful or rich texture on the top, which can be recognized by the computer vision, and so you can in turn, get a point cloud, in turn get a 3D model. But in contrast, if the object itself doesn't have enough feature points, like this little, I think it's WSC toy figurine, which is pretty smooth, plastic on the top with fairly simple color, it's really not the object for photogrammetry. So that's why if you don't know the technology behind it, sometimes you'll get some really creepy results. Actually, that's why I think this talk is so important, because we have a new technology to trying to save the world, and that is 3D Gaussian Splatting. So before I jump into this topic, raise your hand if you know 3D Gaussian splatting, like heard of it. Yo, that's so cool. So cool. Okay, we have like, okay, first you not be able to see the back. We have like about 90% of people who actually heard of 3D Gaussian splatting. This is so cool. But still, like I just want to give a introduction about, explanation about what really 3D Gaussian splatting is. Because, surprisingly, a lot of people I talk with, although they are real experienced in game development, they not necessarily know the exact difference between a mesh or a 3D model versus 3D Gaussian splatting. So I want to use this opportunity to try to explain really well what 3D Gaussian splatting is, because yeah, sometimes the term is just so weird. All right, so let's go it. So basically, 3D Gaussian splatting is basically you have two ways to represent a 3D model. Before you have 3D mesh, everyone know that, right? But with the 3D Gaussian splatting, it possesses another representation form of 3D model. So when you say 3D model before, it's generally just mesh. But now when you say 3D model, it could be mesh, but it could be 3D Gaussian splatting. So it's completely different from mesh. So what I mean by different is, if you look at the video, basically if you see mesh, if you go all the way in, if you zoom all the way up, basically you will see the closed, right, surfaces between points. And this is mesh. Mesh basically means the surfaces with the little grids. And basically the grids are the connecting points between points. So basically, if you zoom all the way into a mesh, you will see a perfectly closed surface with texture. And that's mesh. But if you try to do the same thing on the 3D Gaussian splatting, you will see something that's really interesting happening. So from the distance, it looks almost the same. But if you zoom in, keep zooming in, you will notice actually it's not the surface that represents a 3D model, but rather it's like those kind of weird spikes. You see those spikes I'm talking about? Basically you have like millions of those spikes that like overlapping on each other. And the spikes are actually on a different color, so when they overlap each other, visually from the distance, you will actually see the actual object that were represented not by the mesh, but by the 3D Gaussians. Those are called 3D Gaussians, by the way, and I'll talk more about it. Yeah, so kind of makes sense, right? And all right, let's keep going. Let's go further on this. Yeah, let's go further to explain. So basically, when we generally say 3D model before, right, it basically means a combination of two things, right? Mesh and textures. And what I mean by mesh is the pictures on your right is basically a gray 3D model. You have like those little points. Those are called point clouds, like little points. And then between the points, you have the grids that connect the points. And this is actually the mesh. And the texture, essentially just the colors and materials, wrap on the top of 3D model. So when you unwrap it, you have the texture and the mesh to represent a colored 3D model. But 3D Gaussian splatting is a different story. Like you saw before, basically if you zoom all the way in the 3D Gaussian splatting, you will see the overlap spikes, like what I showed on the left side of the screen. So basically you have these colorful spikes overlapping on each other. And when you zoom all the way, all the way out and see like millions of those color spikes, collapsing each other, you will see a visually represented 3D model by a completely different methods, and that is basically 3D Gaussian splatting. And yeah, I'm not sure how well explained, but I have another video to show you what a spike look like. So look at just pay attention to that gray line that I marked in there, because basically this is called a 3D Gaussian, right? But basically, as you move your camera around it, you will see the 3D Gaussian actually got blurred out. And basically, this is how you represent that points of the object by a one color of 3D Gaussian. So yeah, like I said before, when you overlap millions of those, basically from any angle, you will see a color representation of the 3D model. Kind of makes sense? I hope I explained well. Yeah, but if you Google it, well, you'll see some really, really heavy words like, implicit representation, a hybrid of explicit and implicit. I'm not gonna go over that. It's like next level stuff. But hopefully, the explanation I did was clear enough for you guys to understand, clearly understand what it is. So why do we need 3D Gaussian splatting? Like we have mesh, right? And it kind of served the industry for like 30, 50 years, something like that. So why do we need 3D Gaussian splatting? So I have 2 points to claim. Number one is 3D Gaussian splatting, it will never replace traditional 3D modeling, right? Because in Cury engine, we talk to investors all the time, and sometimes investors are like, oh guys, you guys are replacing 3D modelers. I was like, we'll never do that because 3D modeling is one thing, but 3D scanning, either with mesh or 3D Gaussian splatting, is another thing. You can never replace 3D modeling. So it will never replace 3D modeling, but it will be a huge plus for traditional photogrammetry. What I mean by that is like, look at this. So what I'm going to show you, the video on the right, this is a traditional capture of a photogrammetry. Basically, you turn the mesh off and you turn the texture off and turn the texture on. You will see this. So basically, photogrammetry is really bad at representing something, right? For example, this really thin glass and dirt on the ground. It's really, really hard to be represented by mesh because it's so thin, and it just sometimes it's really hard to get captured from photogrammetry techniques. But if you look at the same scene but from 3D Gaussian splatting, you will see because it's not represented by mesh, it's actually much, much clearer to be represented. So basically, like the point I made before, 3D Gaussian splatting isn't set to replace anything, but it's a huge improvement on photogrammetry. And that's actually the goal I'm trying to achieve. Another really cool example. Sorry, when I click my mouse, the video okay, try this. So have you guys tried photogrammetry before? I think, yeah, I see a lot of nods. Perfect. So photogrammetry, it's impossible to capture a water bottle or glass bottle like this, right? But with 3D Gaussian splatting, you can actually capture, well, I said NSR, like our NSR can capture it as well, but like 3D Gaussian is just better, right? 3D Gaussian splatting, it can actually capture the transparent water bottle that was never done before, right? And actually, I've seen a really cool project that was done by one of our users on Instagram. It was so cool that people can actually do something with the 3D Gaussian splatting today. Yeah, so take a look at this. This is like next level stuff. So what you see here is the whole scene is 3D Gaussian splatting. So that's why you see this little weird balls like in the distance. These are actually the 3D Gaussians that got rendered by the actual game engine, where I think he used Blender in this case. But this is actually really, really cool. But it's a problem. So basically, imagine how you create games, guys. Because what I just showed you earlier, everything about 3D Gaussian splatting I showed you earlier, actually these are the 3D Gaussian splatting scenes, right? When you capture, for example, an object, the 3D Gaussian splatting is not only going to capture that object in the center for you, but also all the background scenes like around it. But when you create games, guys, you don't need a whole scene. You need the assets, the individual assets, so you can like combine those assets manually to create your own world, right? But the problem is, previously, the 3D Gaussian splatting isn't really capable of that. But that's actually a really cool thing that we have here is, I think a couple months ago, we introduced the 3D Gaussian splatting cropping and editing in the Cury engine app. So in the first time ever, you will be able to crop and edit the whole 3D Gaussian splatting scene on your phone and to get a standalone 3D Gaussian splatting asset. But like, I wouldn't say it's asset because like, although it's a standalone 3D model, but it's not, it doesn't really have, PBR maps, stuff like that. So it's not like 100%, assets yet. But like, that's definitely where we're trying to go. Yeah, but like, you can see like we provide a vivid editing tools for you in the app. So you can actually edit the 3D Gaussian to get a standalone 3D Gaussian splatting model. This is actually one of my favorite updates a couple months ago. That's actually pretty cool. All right, so and with the 3D Gaussian splatting cropping scene, you can do something like really cool, like cutting from a whole scene into a standalone assets. It's mind blowing for me. All right, Okay, now let's jump to the topic, like how to use 3D.js add-ons. Well, how to use 3D.js in game engines, and I just disclosed that we use add-ons. Like I said, well, basically all the game engines we used before, Unreal Engine, Blender. Blender's not really a game engine, but like 3D software, and Unity, stuff like that. These softwares are developed based on mesh. Right, it's been developed like tens of years ago, but when 3D Gaussian Splatting came on, because it's not necessarily represented by mesh, so it's not really natively supported by those game engines. So how do we solve that? So we have to introduce 3D Gaussian Splatting add-ons in the existing game engines. So actually, the right now the game engines can support 3D Gaussian Splatting. But how far are we though? Like as you can see, we're not really far. So basically, so if we are gonna rate the compatibility, of each game engine, major game engine with the 3D Gaussian Splatting, if one dot is highlighted, that means it's barely importable, but you can't really do much with it. But if it's five star, or 5 dots, then that means you can use it just like you would do as a traditional 3D model. But even though right now the highest compatibility we have is the Unreal Engine 5, but you only have like 2 dots, so you can barely work on it. But I mean, that's the exciting thing of the tech, right? Like you don't get the perfect tech from day one. You kind of build it on it like gradually, and hopefully one day, maybe next session or 5 sessions after this year, we'll get a fully functional 3D Gaussian Splatting, where we can even see some 3D Gaussian Splatting games eventually. But like we have to walk on it like step by step, right? But right now it's not really cool. But I just want to show you what you can do right now. So actually, so here's a link that you guys can scan or save on your phone. It's actually a free Unreal Engine 5 3D Gaussian Splatting add-on, and it's pretty cool. And you can just download on your on GitHub, and you can just install it on your Unreal Engine 5, and you can start working on it. So what this add-on can do, it's actually, I tried to make it really straightforward. Basically, once you install the Unreal Engine add-on, you will get this. Oh, am I playing it? Nope. Hold on. Sorry. Wait, what? Oh, sorry. No, it's not a video. I thought it was a, my bad. So basically, if you can see in this scene, everything except that car is actually a Unreal Engine scene, like made by mesh, right? Except that car. The car is actually the 3D Gaussian Splatting asset that we just talked about before, right? And when you install that 3D Gaussian Splatting add-ons, you can actually just import that the 3D.js as you would do as a normal 3D model, and just start to position it, right? And when you position it, you will get something like this in the end. But more importantly, I want to show you a glimpse of the future that we're heading to. I forgot to mute myself, but don't worry. Yeah. So what you see here is basically, you have this mannequin walking around a UE scene, but by walking around that car, right? It's pretty cool, but it's actually, okay, let me show you this slide. So you've seen this, right? But yeah, the video looks pretty cool, but it does have very limitations. Actually, I tried to hide the disadvantages from that video. But basically, if you look at that video again, actually, for the 3D Gaussian Splatting in today's technology, although you can import it to Unreal Engine and kind of start to do cool things with it, but the problem is it doesn't have physics, number one. Like basically, if you walk to that car right into that, you will just walk right into that. Like you don't really have physics. And right now, there's like kind of limited ways for you to add physics. Well, there's some other ways. For example, you can add invisible mesh inside that car. So when you walk into that car, you're actually bumping with the invisible mesh, but not the 3D Gaussian Splatting, but it's not smart enough. So we try to solve this kind of problem in a smarter way, and that's actually one thing we're working on right now. And also, there's no relighting. It's actually very, very crucial. That's why I don't really think that 3D Gaussian Splatting is usable at this moment. It's mainly because there's no relighting. And what I mean by relighting is when you capture your 3D Gaussian Splatting, around a scene, basically whatever color condition or lighting condition, the moment you capture it, it's baked in your 3D Gaussian splatting. So right now, there's almost no way for you to take that lighting condition off and get a fully evened out albedo map from the Gaussian splatting. So right now, for example, if you're taking a 3D Gaussian in this condition, you have a strong light shooting from this way. In your 3D Gaussian model, you will have a strong lighting surface on that side. But if you're trying to shoot a different light direction from the other side, then, well, there's really no lighting. So in the 3D Gaussian, you will see kind of a weird kind of, blended lightings from everywhere, like one direction from the mesh. But in the Gaussian, you see the other direction of lighting. So that's actually a really, really main challenge that we're trying to solve. But hopefully it's not far away. I hope in the next session next year, I should be able to show you guys something that's really cool that you can actually do your stuff with it. And also, LOD is also very important, but we don't have that in 3D Gaussian right now. So remember the goddess statue that we looked at in the beginning of the session? If you zoom all the way into that, right, basically you start to see that spikes and in really low resolution, because that's something that we also need to work on as well, because in the actual game, you want to have an LOD. Like, doesn't matter how close you go, the resolution goes up with it. But right now, 3D Gaussian splatting, in practically, it can't do that. And also, there's no PBR. That's another really limitation tool thing that I think is limiting 3D Gaussian splatting from game development. So yeah, I mean, so in conclusion, I think we have a long way to go. But like I said, put the last sentence, it has a lot of potentials. What I mean by a lot of potentials is because although 3D Gaussian, it has a lot of limitations, but it's not something that is unsolvable. Because I'm not sure if you guys know it, but 3D Gaussian splatting, the format of it is by a format called PLY format. And do you know what PLY format is? It's actually a point cloud format. And when we look at point cloud, then we know a lot about it, because point cloud, we've been working on it for like hundreds of years. So 3D Gaussian splatting, because it's represented by this point cloud format, although the training process is different, but there's a lot of things we can work on the point cloud file. So that's why 3D Gaussian splatting, it was just introduced a little bit earlier last year. It was like November of last year. We started to see 3D Gaussian splatting applications like Cury engine go to the market. It's only been like 4 months, 5 months, so like it's really young, but yet we achieved so many things in just 4 or 5 months. So especially because it's PLY format, I think we're gonna achieve much more next year and the year ahead. So yeah, so I'm really, really optimistic about the 3D Gaussian splatting. And yeah, so I counted about 20-something minutes for this session. But I just wanna leave the last 5 minutes for you guys if you get this QA. If you have any questions about 3D Gaussian splatting or nerves or these kind of new technologies that you heard all over the internet, but you don't know what the hell's going on, this is your chance to clear your mind, because I've seen so many questions on the internet asking what's the difference between nerve and 3D Gaussian, like why is it so cool, like stuff like that. So don't be shy, guys. I'm the guy. That's the whole point. I'm offering this session. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask around. All right. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Hey, great talk. Thank you. I wonder if you've seen any good examples of animation via skinning, weighting, rigging, that sort of thing, or whether there's another animation solution.
You mean 3D Gaussian splatting animation?
Yeah.
Very good question. Right now, if we're talking about the actual real projects, then I haven't seen any actual projects that were done by 3D Gaussian, but I've seen many research works that's done around it. Basically, why we're not seeing so many animations around it is because 3D Gaussian is not mesh, so it cannot be perfectly rigged right now. So that's why you can't really do too much with the 3D Gaussian. But actually, we have many research going on, not only us, but like we have a lot of research going on around the world that's trying to solve the rigging problem on the 3D Gaussian. And I can't really disclose too much because we have CGraph and CVPR coming in. Like those are like undisclosed papers. But what I'm trying to say is like we are really close to animate a 3D Gaussian and start to make it work.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hello, thank you for the wonderful talk.
Thank you.
I had some questions about performance.
Yep.
Were there any like comparisons like mesh versus Gaussian splats? And since you're drawing so many spikes, are there any concerns for overdraw?
Good question. Actually, short answer is if you look at compare about the FPS right now, when you render a 3D Gaussian splatting, the FPS is indeed is lower than you would actually render on mesh. But it's not actually solvable because in the 3D Gaussian splatting, actually, you have a lot of information. You not only have this kind of appearance, not only have that color thing, you also, this kind of format also include the kind of reflectiveness kind of information in that while you were capturing it. Basically, if you're trying to capture this talking stage, for example, you can actually visually see the lighting moves with the camera. But with the actual 3D Gaussian splatting, that information is embedded in the 3D Gaussian splatting. But that's actually useless when you're trying to do your own thing, right? So if you try to extract that out of the file format, you can have a relatively, a smaller size of the 3D Gaussian splatting. So that's actually another direction of research where some schools are actually heading toward. So right now, it's worse than mesh, but it's doable.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that. I have a question about the rendering part.
Yep.
Since it is, as you said, it is not a mesh, but our current rendering pipeline is still like using mesh to render everything.
Yes.
So there's a conversion maybe for that. So do you think there could be an optimization in the rendering pipeline itself for rendering point cloud format better?
Yes. Oh, that question is so good because because we just introduced 3D Gaussian splatting to mesh in our app like last week, something like that. So we do support a mesh inclusive 3D Gaussian. But from my own personal standpoint, I think it's just an intermediate solution at this moment. Because if you try to convert 3D Gaussian to mesh, basically 3D Gaussian loses all the points. Right? Basically, because what's so cool about 3D Gaussian is it's so tolerant to the camera pose calculation, if you know what I mean, right? Basically, before, if you're trying to do photogrammetry, the reason why some photogrammetry model is so rough is because when you're trying to align the cameras or photos from the first step, it's not necessarily give you a perfect camera pose calculation. And if you don't have a perfect camera pose calculation, you're going to in turn have a really rough surfaces. And 3D Gaussian splatting, because it doesn't represent a better mesh, it's so tolerant to the camera pose calculation. But if you're trying to get back the mesh on top of it, then it becomes camera pose dependent. And that will pretty much loses all the point because the whole sexy point from 3D Gaussian is from Cury engine app side of view, you've seen a tremendous amount of increase on the successful rate on people creating 3D models. So we don't want to lose that. So although we have mesh, it's because, like you said, mesh is pretty much the only way you can render an actual thing. So we want people to actually be able to use 3D Gaussian splatting. So we have mesh inclusive 3D GS right now. But if you're talking about five years in the future, I think we really need to work on the way to be able to render 3D GS alongside mesh. That's why I'm talking about relighting, PBR. I'm really looking forward to a way that people can, have a mesh of have a table that is mesh, but on the top, on the water bottle, that is 3D GS. But when you put the same lighting from Unreal Engine, I really the ultimate goal is I want the 3D GS to be able to respond to the light the same as the mesh. So that's the goal we're talking about in the 5 years.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you guys. All right, so if there are more questions, so enjoy your day and your last day on the GDC, and hopefully I'll see you next year. So yeah. Oh, by the way, feel free to join our booth in the South Hall S1421 because we are going to show you the world's first 3D Gaussian splatting rendering on Apple Vision Pro. It's amazing. It's like you're standing among your dream, like you captured before. It's cool. So feel free to drop by and check it out. Yeah, see you next year.